Great. Welcome, everyone, for our sessions, our continuing series here on our book talks around our five conversations book talks. So we are getting into the second conversation, difficult conversations. Let me just pull up my deck here real quick. All right. Yeah. So we're looking at kind of how to turn conflict into connection in this session. So just as a little um, overview. So we're going to start with just a little reflection on our own experiences. We'll talk a little about some of the core skills that we teach here at Simsola in terms of how do we restore safety. We'll do a little activity to kind of engage with some of the skills, and then we'll have a little bit of a discussion. So that's what we have planned for today for our session. What I want to start with is just take a minute for a little reflection. So I'm sure we've all had times where we've had some challenging conversations, maybe a little tense, maybe a little heated. Maybe it started out okay, but then things kind of fell off. So think about a recent time where things got heated in a conversation. What did you say or do that really helped to mitigate or reduce some of that tension? What did you do that maybe seemed to help things or help resolve things? And then what did not work? Maybe either things you did or the other person did, things that kind of tended to escalate the tension, increase the acrimony. So think a little bit about, I'll give you a minute or two just to kind of think of recent examples and try to think about kind of what you said or did that either helped improve or kind of find a way of resolution or at least kind of mitigate some of the tension. And then what did not work or what wasn't so great. Okay. So as I was mentioning, so we have a core communication program that has 6 levels, and each level has 4 clusters of skills that all kind of work together. So I'm kind of jumping you guys into level 4 here, which is kind of restoring safety. So this is when things kind of maybe fall apart or run off the rails. We're going to get into the skills related to this. So when we think about kind of restoring safety or turning tensions into trust, the idea is really prioritizing that connection over kind of being right or being in control. Again, as Garrett was saying, kind of being curious versus kind of getting into the conflict, right? So a lot of it's around, acknowledging what went wrong, inviting others to share their views, and really being open and trying to have less judgment, right? So there's going to be 4 skills. So inviting feelings, stepping out of the conversation, which we've kind of touched on already, seeking a higher purpose, right? Like a bigger view of what we're working on, and then taking accountability. So these are the 4 skills in level 4. So I'm going to just walk through each of these one by one, just so we have a sense of them. Uh, so the first one's inviting feelings, right? So this is when you see the tension. Oftentimes it's sort of unspoken, but just sort of offering a guess of like, what's going on with this person and how they might be reacting, and inviting them maybe to just share a little bit more about how they're feeling or what's going on. So you're moving away from the content and back to emotions or feelings, right? And then when you get a chance to talk about the feelings, people can feel acknowledged, they feel heard. It can also help diffuse some of that tension, just kind of calling it out and just acknowledging it. So for example, you might say like, right now, I imagine you might be feeling, frustrated or might be feeling upset or angry, right? So it's just kind of inviting that into the space. Or given what's happened, I could see how, this might bring out a lot of emotions, right? So you're just kind of priming and creating space for that feeling. And then you also want to be, again, you don't want to sort of be absolute, like, I know how you're feeling, right? That can make it worse, right? Projecting people's feelings. So you want to invite like, is that right? Right? Or would you agree? So you're inviting them to share their feelings. So just as a quick example, actually, Tammy and I earlier this week had a bit of a heated conversation about a project, but she was really great about inviting my feelings. Like she's like, Zach, you seem frustrated right now. And it really helped to make me feel heard and recognized. And I think it really diffused the tension. So really naming emotions, calling out emotions, rather than avoiding them can be a great way to shift the conversation and just help diffuse things and mitigate that reaction. Similar to that, as we sort of touched on, is stepping out of the conversation, right? So kind of redirecting it towards what's happening in the moment and the tensions versus the content or substance. So, if it gets stalled, it can be better to look at the interaction itself, right? So it also helps kind of recognize or reset or re-engage more constructively. So it's sort of like, it seems like we're not making headway here, right? So let's take a step back, right? Or it sounds like we're not able to get on the same page here. So what's going on? Like, let's just look at the dynamic, right? And again, inviting with curiosity their perspective, right? How do you think this conversation is going, right? What's your view? Maybe we could step back and try a different approach. So again, even with like inviting feelings, that's a way into stepping out of the conversation and sort of shifting the focus away from whatever you're debating or arguing about to the interaction itself. So that's the second one. Seeking a higher purpose, another great way is to kind of look to more encompassing goals. Again, rather than getting stuck in the weeds, I think a little bit what Lucy was saying, kind of going down certain tracks, we can step back and reframe it, right? We can look at, there's common goals, there's bigger issues that we can be looking at, right? Rather than getting down in the weeds, let's step back and look at the bigger purpose, right? And more, there's typically more alignment at a higher order, right? And so we can kind of see where there's some common grounds around the challenge. So for example, it's like, we're getting stuck on the details here, but let's look at the bigger picture, for example. Or it seems like we can't find a mutual solution, but can we at least agree what we're working on is for, the good of the company or the team, right? Or I know it seems like we're not seeing eye to eye right here, but maybe we can agree on the broad purpose, right? So it's trying to reframe or shift the conversation to some higher order. So even just going back to the example talking about Tammy, one of the things I tried to focus on was like, well, we all agree we want the best. We want the best output. We want the best, product that we can. And so even though we were kind of talking about the process and debating about which way to do this, what I was trying to say is like, actually, we're on the same page on our goal. So it's much easier than to resolve those other tensions if we have something that we can align it around and we both feel committed to that goal, then it's much easier to move through those other challenges. So seeing a higher purpose is another great tactic you can use. And then the last one here, taking accountability. This one's a little bit tricky because it requires some humility, some willingness to let go of being right, but it's sort of owning up to maybe your role in the situation, whether it was intentional or not, right? There's things that makes mistakes happen, and so often just taking a moment to say like, hey, taking accountability, it shows that you're willing to be open, you're willing to be humble, curious, bring someone else's into the view. So, there may have been a mix up on my end and I don't want that to happen again, right? Or I'm sorry things turned out the way that was not my intention, right? So, or I realize things didn't work as expected. Next time I'll be sure to try to, do something differently. So again, if we can take accountability for our piece of that, it helps create some goodwill. And then other people tend to have an openness or willingness to kind of step on your side a little bit further, or at least mitigate some of the tensions or resolve some of that. Is this making sense? I know I'm kind of breezing through these quickly. Any questions? Make sense? Okay, so now do a little activity here. So what I want you guys to do is take a minute and consider these 4 skills that we just covered. Pick one skill that you kind of already resonate with. It feels natural, comfortable, something you tend to do already. And like identify a phrase that you use, right? If it's stepping out of the conversation, inviting feelings, seeking a higher purpose, think of an actual phrase and maybe an example of when you use that in a conversation. And then pick another one that feels hard or uncomfortable, or maybe something you didn't really consider before or nothing you've tried. And again, come up with a phrase or line that you might use and maybe an instance of where you could try that, for example. Okay, so 2, one is like a skill that you feel comfortable with, and one that maybe feels a little bit more uncomfortable or a little bit tricky, and try to come up with an actual phrase or something you might say in that instance. Does that make sense? So just as a reminder, these are the 4 skills. I'll just give you a minute on your own, and then we're gonna go back to the breakouts for a minute. So just see if you can come up with 2, one that feels comfortable and an example, one that might be new to you or it's a little bit more challenging, and an example there.
Yeah, so Colin, I'm pasting it right now. So you can see,
Thanks.
yeah.
You can go back here too.
Number
That pace.
4, yeah. 4 is take responsibility. Yeah. So these, there's the 3. Did I miss
Oh, do you need that?
invite feelings, step out? Oh, I missed the invite feelings. Sorry. Give me 1 sec. Yeah. So invite feelings, step out of the conversation, seek higher purpose, take accountability. Yeah. So the challenge is to pick one you're comfortable with and pick one you're not comfortable with. I think about applying to that situation you just talked about.
Thank Thank you so much. We're a little over time, so I definitely want to wrap up. But it was just such a pleasure having you guys here. We have a series continuing, so I'd love to have you join other ones. As we've shared here, we do this work in organizations. So if this is something you're interested in your organization, we have obviously a lot of content, but we also customize. So we were talking to Mike earlier, coaching. If you have your own models and frameworks, that's all stuff that we can adapt and create simulations around, really to give people a chance to practice in a safe place and really build those skills. Right? Just listening to a lecture, hearing things is not really going to give you new capabilities. It takes time. You got to get on the court, you got to practice, things like that. So that's really the gist of what we're trying to do here at Simsola. So such a pleasure having you guys here. Thank you for your time. Unless there's anything else, I'm going to wrap up for our session today. Hopefully you guys will join another one. Love to see you guys.